Claire's hands trembled as she recognized the familiar silhouette across the farmer's market. 15 years had passed since that devastating argument that tore them apart, yet Margaret's laugh still made her heart skip exactly the same way it did in 1995. What started as teenage sweethearts had evolved into something deeper in their 30s, only to shatter under the weight of career pressures and family expectations. Now, at 52 and 49 respectively, both women had survived marriages, divorces, children grown and flown, and the long journey of self-discovery that comes with midlife. But seeing Margaret again, silver threading through her auburn hair and those green eyes still sparkling with mischief, Claire realized that some loves are simply meant to endure even when they seem lost forever. The Saturday morning farmers market in Portland had become Claire's ritual. At 52, she'd found peace in the simple pleasure of selecting fresh produce, chatting with vendors she'd known for years, and savoring her weekend coffee without the demands of her demanding law practice. Her divorce from David had been finalized 3 years ago, an amicable end to a marriage that had provided stability but never passion. Their 2 children, now in college, had taken it well, perhaps sensing what Claire was only beginning to acknowledge about herself. She was examining heirloom tomatoes when she heard that distinctive laugh that had haunted her dreams for over a decade. Her head snapped up, and across the crowded market, she saw Margaret Chunwilliams bargaining playfully with the herb vendor. Time seemed to collapse. The silver in Margaret's hair caught the morning light, and she wore a flowing bohemian dress that spoke to the artist Claire remembered. But there were changes to laugh lines around those green eyes, a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there in their younger days. Margaret looked up at that moment, as if sensing Claire's gaze. Their eyes met across 30 feet of bustling market-goers, and the world went silent. Margaret's hand flew to her throat, a gesture Claire remembered from their most vulnerable moments together. Claire, Margaret's voice carried across the space between them, uncertain, yet hopeful. Claire abandoned her tomatoes and walked toward her past, her heart pounding like a teenager's. Maggie, God, you look wonderful. They stood there, 2 mature women suddenly transformed into the young lovers they'd once been. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe it's really you. I heard you'd moved to San Francisco. I did, for almost 10 years, but I came back after, ... double quotes. Claire hesitated, then decided on honesty. After my marriage ended, Portland always felt like home. Margaret nodded knowingly. I understand. My divorce was finalized last year. 22 years of trying to be someone I wasn't. She paused, studying Claire's face. You know, I've thought about you so often, wondered what might have been if we hadn't been so young and scared. The vendor behind Margaret cleared his throat, reminding them they were blocking his stall. They laughed, and suddenly the awkwardness evaporated. Would you like to get coffee? Claire asked, her voice barely steady. I know this little place, ... Margaret's smile was radiant. I'd love that. I was just finishing up here anyway. She purchased her herbs quickly, her hands shaking slightly as she counted out bills. As they walked toward the coffee shop, neither spoke about the elephant between them, the bitter argument that had ended everything 15 years ago, or the years of wondering that had followed. Instead, they fell into step together naturally, as if no time had passed at all. The coffee shop buzzed with weekend energy, but Claire and Margaret found a quiet corner table by the window. Sunlight streamed across Margaret's face as she wrapped her hands around her mug, a gesture so familiar it made Claire's chest tighten. Tell me about your art, Claire said, noticing paint stains on Margaret's fingers. Are you still painting? Margaret's face lit up more than ever. After the divorce, I finally had the courage to pursue it seriously. I have a small studio downtown, and I actually make a living at it now. She laughed softly. Remember how you used to say I'd be famous someday? I meant it then, and I still believe it. Claire studied Margaret's face, noting the peace there that had been absent in their tumultuous younger years. I'm proud of you for following your dreams. What about you? Still saving the world one case at a time? Claire smiled ruefully. Environmental law, mostly. It feels meaningful, even if it's not as romantic as I once thought it would be. She paused. David, my ex-husband, he never really understood why I cared so much about the work, but I always did, Margaret said quietly. I loved how passionate you were about justice. You'd come home so fired up about some injustice you were fighting. It was beautiful to watch. The mention of their shared past hung between them. Claire took a breath. Maggie, about what happened. We don't have to, Margaret interrupted gently. Not yet. We're different people now, are we? Claire met her eyes. Because sitting here with you, I feel exactly like I did 20 years ago. Margaret's cheeks flushed. That's what scares me, and what gives me hope at the same time. They talked for 3 hours, sharing stories about their children, their failed marriages, their dreams deferred and rediscovered. Margaret spoke about her son, James, now 18, and heading to art school in the fall. Claire talked about her daughter Emma and son Michael, both thriving in their respective colleges. The hardest part, Claire admitted, was pretending to be completely straight for all those years. David was a good man, but I was never fully present in that marriage. It wasn't fair to him. Margaret nodded. Robert knew, I think. Toward the end, he said he felt like he was married to a ghost. He wasn't wrong. She reached across the table and briefly touched Claire's hand. I never stopped thinking about you, about us. The touch sent electricity through Claire's entire body. I tried to forget. I really did, but you were always there, in the back of my mind. As afternoon faded into evening, they reluctantly prepared to leave. Margaret hesitated at the door. Would you like to have dinner sometime? As friends, I mean. To catch up properly. Claire smiled. I'd like that very much. But Maggie, Margaret turned back. I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. If we do this whatever, this is I need you to know that. Margaret's smile was radiant. I wouldn't want it any other way. 3 weeks of dinners, long walks, and tentative conversations had brought them to Margaret's art studio. Claire stood before a large canvas, mesmerized by the swirling blues and greens that seemed to capture the very essence of longing. This is incredible, she breathed. When did you paint this? Margaret stood behind her, so close Claire could smell her familiar perfume still, that same jasmine scent after all these years. 2 years ago, right after my divorce was finalized, I called it What Remains. Claire turned, finding herself mere inches from Margaret's face. It looks like how missing someone feels. It was inspired by missing you, Margaret admitted softly. The confession hung between them, heavy with possibility. Claire reached up to touch Margaret's cheek, and this time, Margaret didn't pull away. I missed you too, Claire whispered. Every single day. Their first kiss in 15 years was gentle, tentative, as if they were both afraid the other might disappear. But as Margaret's arms came around her, Claire felt something inside her chest unlock a part of herself she'd kept carefully, guarded through her entire marriage. I've been so scared, Margaret murmured against her lips. Of what? Of hoping, of thinking maybe we could have another chance. Margaret pulled back to look into Claire's eyes. We're not the same people we were. We have children now, responsibilities, our families, ... Claire understood. Margaret's parents had never accepted their relationship, and the pressure from both their families had contributed to their devastating breakup. My kids know I'm gay, Claire said carefully. I came out to them after the divorce. They were incredibly supportive, really. Margaret's eyes widened. James knows too, but my parents, ... double quotes, she trailed off. We don't have to figure everything out right now, Claire said, taking Margaret's hands. We can take this slowly, see where it goes. Over the following months, they did exactly that. They navigated the complexity of reintroducing each other to their children, both sets of whom were surprisingly accepting of their mother's renewed relationship. Claire's daughter Emma even confided that she'd always suspected her mother wasn't entirely straight, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Margaret's parents remained distant and disapproving. There were moments when old insecurities surfaced, when Margaret would pull away emotionally, or when Claire would become too controlling, trying to manage everyone's reactions to their relationship. I can't do this if you're going to run every time things get complicated, Claire said after a particularly difficult evening when Margaret had left, abruptly following a tense phone call with her mother. Margaret stood in Claire's doorway at midnight, tears streaming down her face. I'm not running. I'm here, aren't I? I'm terrified. Claire, what if we mess this up again? What if we're too broken from our marriages to set in our ways? Claire pulled her inside, holding her close. Then we'll figure it out together. But I need you to trust me. Trust us. It was then that Margaret finally told her about the loneliest years of her marriage, about the therapy that had helped her accept herself, about the dreams she'd had where Claire came back to her. And Claire shared her own journey, the slow realization during her marriage that she was living someone else's life, the relief of finally being honest about who she was. A year and a half after their reunion, Claire stood in Margaret's art studio, surrounded by canvases that told the story of their renewed love. Margaret had painted their journey, their first coffee together, walks in the park, quiet dinners, moments of laughter and reconciliation. The latest painting showed two women's hands intertwined, wearing matching silver rings. "It's beautiful," Claire said, studying the ring painting. "But we're not wearing rings." Margaret emerged from the storage room carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a nervous smile. "Not yet." Claire's heart stopped. "Maggie, what are you?" "I know we said we'd take things slowly," Margaret interrupted, setting down the champagne with shaking hands. "And I know we're both scared of making the same mistakes we made when we were younger. But Claire, I've spent 15 years trying to forget you, and another year and a half falling in love with you all over again. I don't want to waste any more time." Margaret dropped to one knee right there in her paint-splattered studio, pulling a small velvet box from her pocket. "You're not the same person I fell in love with 20 years ago, and neither am I. We're better. We're braver. We've learned how to fight for what matters." Claire's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Claire Elizabeth Montgomery," Margaret continued, her voice steady despite her tears. "Will you marry me? Will you let me love you the way I should have loved you all those years ago? Will you be my wife?" The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the late afternoon light streaming through the studio windows. But it wasn't the ring that made Claire sink to her knees to meet Margaret's eyes. It was the woman holding it, this brave, beautiful woman who had found her way back to herself and back to Claire. "Yes," Claire whispered, then louder, "Yes, absolutely yes." They were both crying and laughing as Margaret slipped the ring onto Claire's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment as long as they had. "I have something to confess," Claire said between kisses. "I bought you a ring 3 months ago. I've been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment." Margaret pulled back, laughing through her tears. "Are you serious?" Claire reached into her purse and pulled out her own small velvet box. "I was going to propose next weekend at the Botanical Gardens, but this is perfect. This studio, surrounded by your art, by the story of us, this is perfect." They exchanged rings there on the paint-splattered floor, making promises they were finally mature enough to keep. Outside, Portland hummed with life, but inside the studio, time stood still for two women who had learned that sometimes love really does get a second chance. At 53 and 50, Claire and Margaret are planning a small wedding for the following spring. In the same botanical gardens where Claire had planned to propose, their children are excited to gain new family members, and while Margaret's parents remain distant, they're slowly coming around. What started as a chance encounter at a farmer's market has blossomed into something deeper than either woman thought possible at this stage of life. They've learned that mature love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other every day, communicating honestly, and having the courage to be vulnerable. Their love story proves that it's never too late for second chances, and that sometimes the best relationships are the ones that are given time to grow, break, and heal. Ready to find your own second chance at love? Join our community of mature women seeking authentic connections, because love doesn't have an expiration date.